Hi Founder fans, Jason here, and today's founder is Salem Poor. Now Salem Poor was born into slavery in Massachusetts, but after working very hard in his off hours was able to save up quite a lot of money and by just 22 years old purchased his own freedom. After this he did marry and have a son, but then the American Revolutionary War broke out. So Salem Poor decided to sign up with the Massachusetts militia, not yet the Continental Army at this point, the militia, and he went out with the Minutemen and fought in the Battle of Lexington and Concord. After this, he stayed around and he ends up fighting in the Battle of Bunker Hill and does such an extraordinarily good job that 14 officers actually wrote a petition to the Massachusetts colonial legislature commending his work and making sure everyone knew that Salem Poor was a war hero very early in the hostilities. Now, shortly after this, George Washington shows up and takes over and begins the Continental Army officially. Fortunately, Washington knew that while he had just taken over an army mostly of New England men, there were a lot of men coming up from the South who were about to fight in this war, and they would not look kindly on fighting with black patriots. Because of this, Washington actually eliminated any black patriots from the Continental Army. Shortly after this, the British said, hey, any slaves who leave their master and want to fight with the British, well, you can get your freedom. This made Washington and many of the wealthier Southern plantation owners very nervous, especially because they believed that this would encourage many black freemen to fight with the British as well. And to a large degree it did, but what Washington did is he changed his mind and said, okay, let's try and re-enlist the black patriots who attempted to fight with us in the first place. And again, as many of them did not come back, Salem Poor was one of the men who came back. Unfortunately, the details of his life get extremely fuzzy at this point, not only because records were not kept very well of him, but also because there were several men under the name of Salem Poor operating in and around Massachusetts at this time. But it does appear he went and fought in the New York campaign. We're not sure if he fought in the Battle of White Plains or the Battle of Saratoga, but possibly both. But we do know he stayed with the Continental Army for a full 5 years until 1780 when the main body of fighting went south. And Salem Poor decided to resign from the army and stay in the north. And from here, his life gets even more fuzzy, unfortunately. It does seem that he spent a little bit of time in the almshouse, which is where someone who was in debt would go until they could repay their debt. And it does seem that he married about 3 more times. Now, there have been accusations he's a polygamist. There's really no proof of this. It's kind of hearsay. It's highly unlikely because polygamy was very looked down on at the time. And while, especially in Massachusetts, black people were getting more and more rights all the time, being a black person who was a polygamist in Massachusetts, Puritan, or at least recently Puritan Massachusetts, is kind of unlikely. He does seem to have had several wives throughout his life. And then, sadly, the last thing we know about him is he did go to an almshouse at about 53, 54 years old, again in debt, and he dies later that year. So unfortunately, his life ends fairly sadly, but of all the black patriots that we do know about, Salem Poor is the one whose heroics are pretty much best documented, especially in the Battle of Bunker Hill, where, as I said, 14 different officers signed off on a petition just to inform the Massachusetts Assembly, hey, Salem Poor is doing a very, very good job. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit like. If you're new here, hit subscribe. We put out videos 5 days a week. And tomorrow, as in every Friday, we play trivia, where I am making up the questions myself now. And we have a few Liberty & Co. items that we are going to give away as prizes to the best trivia answerer out there. So make sure you join us. Make sure you subscribe, hit notifications so you know when we go live. Thank you so much. I will be back with you with that trivia tomorrow.